At the beginning of the drama, we see the male lead, who is a Cupid named Sang-hyuk. Sang-hyuk has a gun in his hand. Then we see a restaurant outside which a man and a woman are on a date, but they are unable to express their love. When Sang-hyuk shoots the gun at them, they both confess their feelings to each other and start kissing. Seeing them, everyone present there says, "This restaurant is really good." Then a long line of people forms outside the restaurant. In the next scene, Sang-hyuk comes to his friends, and they are also Cupids. There is a dog named Dong-chil, and that dog also becomes a man. There are two Cupids, one of whom is named Dong-ku, and they are fighting with each other. One of the Cupids says, "Why did you shoot that arrow? Its shine has diminished." After this, we see a scene from 500 years ago where these three are friends. Dong-chil was about to shoot an arrow at Sang-hyuk, but Sang-hyuk moves from his place to save a girl named So-hee, who was being shot at by someone with an arrow. When Dong-chil misses his target, he turns into a dog, and the other Cupid's wings are burned. In the present, we see that until this arrow completely turns into gold, these people will be stuck here. In the next scene, we see the female lead, whose name is Beck Ryune. She is a veterinarian, and there is another hospital across from hers, but no one goes there because Beck Ryune is very beautiful, and therefore there is a line of boys at her hospital. Then we see a boy going to Beck Ryune with flowers, and seeing that boy, some nurses talk amongst themselves. This man will also get hurt. Then we see in a flashback that when Beck Ryune was young, she was dating a boy, but he got hurt. Whenever Beck Ryune dated any boy, he would get hurt. Someone would get struck by lightning, someone would start suffocating. In the present, a nurse says, "Any boy who dates Beck Ryune will get hurt." That's why Beck Ryune hasn't dated anyone yet, and she loves animals because animals won't get hurt. Just then, another nurse asks, "Her family must be having a lot of trouble?" A nurse says, "No, she's an orphan. She doesn't have any family." In the next scene, Beck Ryune is on a mountain and praying to God. Then we see in a flashback that Beck Ryune and a friend of hers went to a tarot reader. Beck Ryune asks the man, "Whenever I date someone, they get hurt." He says, "You have committed a sin in your past life, and if you want to get rid of it, you have to go to a mountain and ask God for forgiveness for your sin for 1,000 days. After 1,000 days are completed, a man will come to you, and you will be able to date that man." In the present, Beck Ryune is returning home after praying. Then she sees a man who is Sang-hyuk, and Beck Ryune keeps looking at him because he is very handsome. Sang-hyuk also goes to that mountain, and he has a bouquet in his hand. Beck Ryune comes home and writes on the calendar, "I have now gone to the mountain 993 times. Next, we see Sang-hyuk and the other Cupids going to a restaurant, the same one we saw at the beginning of the episode. Then we meet the restaurant owner, whose name is Park Sung. After feeding them, Park Sung comes to his room and remembers his past. There, he was talking to his grandfather. Park Sung's grandfather says, "These are called Cupids, and they change into dogs. Because of them, we have become rich. So after I'm gone, you take care of them." Here we learn that Park Sung knows that all four of them are Cupids. Then in the next scene, we see Sang-hyuk approaching his car, but he sees that another car is parked in front of his. Then he sees a restaurant there. He goes inside and asks people, "Whose car is parked outside? Remove it quickly." But no one was speaking. Then we see Beck Ryune there, standing and very drunk. Seeing Sang-hyuk, she says, "Honey." Saying this, she falls down. Then the restaurant owner, whose name is Yoon Chai, tells Sang-hyuk, "Your girlfriend fell down. Lift her and take her home." Sang-hyuk says, "I am not her boyfriend." But Yoon Chai says, "You are lying, lift her," and she hasn't paid the bill either. Poor Sang-hyuk has to pay the bill too. Then he lifts Beck Ryune and takes her to his car. Beck Ryune says, "Your smell is very good." But Sang-hyuk says nothing, just asks, "Where is your house?" Beck Ryune says nothing. Then in the next scene, we see a woman with a dog, and the dog finds a dead body. In the next scene, the police arrive there and the investigation begins. They find the belongings of two girls and a dead body. One of the girls' names is Jung-ah. Then we learn that these girls were kidnapped in 1993. Now this case has come to light, but the culprit has not yet been caught. The Cupids are watching this news on TV. Then in the next scene, we see Beck Ryune at the police station. When she comes to her senses, she asks the policeman, "What am I doing here?" The policeman says, "A man dropped you off last night and said that this girl was lying on the road." Then, in the next scene, we see Sang-hyuk receiving a call, which is from a policeman. The policeman says, "We have found Jung-ah." This policeman's name is Dae-sik. Then Sang-hyuk, seeing Jung-ah's clothes, remembers a past scene. Jung-ah tells Sang-hyuk, "I love you." One day Jung-ah promises Sang-hyuk, "I will come to this place tomorrow, you wait for me here." Sang-hyuk goes to the same place, but Jung-ah is not there. but he sees the police there, and he learns that Jong-ah has been kidnapped from there. Then in the next scene, we see Beck Ryune going to the same restaurant. Beck Ryune asks Yoon-chae, "Who was that man?" Yoon-chae says, "I don't know who he was, and you keep drinking alone. Look, a girl is sitting there. Go and sit next to her." Then Beck Ryune comes to that girl. That girl's name is Yoon-shi, and both of them talk to each other. Then both exchange their numbers, but just then the girl gets a call and her battery is low. Beck Ryune writes her number on a letter and gives it to her. Then we see a man watching both of them. Next, we see Sang-hyuk watching a man leaving his dog outside. Sang-hyuk approaches him and, showing his gun, says, "You are not a good person." The man says, "I don't want to die." Then Sang-hyuk shoots him with the gun, but the man doesn't die. Instead, he starts to love his dog. Next, we see Sang-hyuk, to whom a child comes and says, "What kind of cupids are there?" Sang-hyuk is about to explain when we also see Beck Ryune here, who, looking at a picture of a cupid, says, "He's just useless. Why doesn't he shoot an arrow of love at me?" Sang-hyuk thinks, "Did she recognize me?" Then Sang-hyuk says to Beck Ryune, "Did you call me a scoundrel?" Beck Ryune says, "Are you a cupid?" Looking at Sang-hyuk, she says, "Aren't you the one who left me at the police station?" Sang-hyuk says, "What could I do? You had drunk so much?" Beck Ryune says, "Okay, but thank you for that. And what's your name?" But Sang-hyuk doesn't tell her his name. Beck Ryune says, "It's okay. I'll call you Superman because you saved my life. And give me your number." Sang-hyuk says, "I don't want to have relationships with girls." After a while, Sang-hyuk is looking at a red thread, a thread that shows whether people can fall in love or not. But Sang-hyuk sees that the red thread is not on Beck Ryune. Beck Ryune sees Sang-hyuk looking at her, so she asks, "Why are you looking at me?" Sang-hyuk says, "I'm not looking." Then Beck Ryune comes to Sang-hyuk and says, "Don't fall in love with me, otherwise you'll get hurt." Sniffing Sang-hyuk, she says, "Your smell is so good." Next, we see that Yoon-shi has gone missing. Yoon-shi is the girl who met Beck Ryune at the restaurant. Then we see a police station where they are discussing this case. A detective named Seo-jae is telling everyone, Yoon-shi was inside a restaurant, and when she was going out of the restaurant, she disappeared. We checked all the cameras, but we found nothing. But a man named Myun-min spoke to Yoon-shi last. We had also seen earlier that when Beck Ryune was giving Yoon-shi her number, she received a call. That call was from Myun-min. Then Seo-jae tells everyone, both Myun-min and Yoon-shi are married. We received a report from Yoon-shi's husband that my wife has gone missing. 3 people are witnesses in this case. One is the restaurant owner Yoon-chae, along with another man and another woman who was talking to Yoon-shi inside the restaurant. But the police don't know anything about Beck Ryune. The police go to the restaurant and ask Yoon-chae, "Who is that girl?" Yoon-chae says, "I don't know her name, but she used to come here. You can meet her." Then in the next scene, we see a man checking the cameras, and in them, he finds the footage where Sang-hyuk was shooting the dog owner man with the love bullet. Then we see the same scene where Beck Ryune was sniffing Sang-hyuk. Beck Ryune's heart beats very fast, and so, looking intently at Sang-hyuk, she starts to leave. Sang-hyuk also chases her because he wants to know why there was no red thread on her. Next, we see Myun-min being arrested. Then Seo-jae says, "You fought with Yoon-shi and killed her, didn't you? Because blood was found in your car, and the DNA report shows that the blood is Yoon-shi's." Myun-min says, "That's not true. Yes, we fought, but that was a long time ago, not on the day Yoon-shi disappeared, and we only had a small fight." Then the police show Yoon-chae and another man a photo asking, "Was this the man?" Both of them say no, it wasn't him. That man was taller and thinner. Next, we see Beck Ryune having to perform emergency surgery on a dog, so she goes to the hospital. Sang-hyuk follows her and just watches her. Sang-hyuk thinks, why doesn't she have a red thread? Then Beck Ryune finishes the surgery and is dancing in her room. Then she thinks about Sang-hyuk, and her heart starts beating fast. Next, we see Sang-hyuk asleep. Then he has a dream about Beck Ryune. Beck Ryune comes to Sang-hyuk, and Sang-hyuk says, "What are you doing here?" Beck Ryune says, "I told you not to fall in love with me." Sang-hyuk says, "I haven't fallen in love with you." He sees himself tied up with a rope. Sang-hyuk starts shouting loudly, but then he sees that it was just a dream. Then we see Dong-chil with Sang-hyuk, completely in human form. Next, we see the police officers going to the dog owner man and asking him, "Who was the man who showed you the gun?" The man smiles and says, "I don't know who he was, but if you find that man, please introduce me to him, because I got a lot of happiness from him, and I want to thank him." Next, we see Seo-jae learning that a policeman and his wife died in an accident, but the driver is still alive and undergoing treatment. They also had a dog, which has been saved by a veterinarian. Seo-jae asks, "Where is that hospital?" When Seo-jae goes to the hospital and sees Beck Ryune for the first time, he falls in love with her at first sight. On the other hand, we see Dong-chil going to meet his girlfriend after a long time. His girlfriend asks, "Where were you all this time?" Dong-chil says, "Forgive me, Then they are about to kiss, but Dongchil turns into a dog. His girlfriend sees that he has disappeared again and starts scolding him. Dongchil hears all this and comes home sadly. All the Cupids say his heart is broken. Song Hyuk says, "I'm taking him to a hospital." Then Song Hyuk goes to the hospital and Beck Ryune sees him. Both of them start looking at each other. Then Beck Ryune starts her work and Song Hyuk sits outside watching her. Then a call comes and Beck Ryune learns that the owner of the dog she operated on yesterday has died. Beck Ryune says, "What will we do now? I don't know who will adopt it now." Then Seo Jae comes and says, "I will adopt it." On the other hand, we see Yoon Chae, whose restaurant has a visitor. After a while, we are shown a policeman who is looking at Yoon Chae's restaurant, which has caught fire, and Yoon Chae has died. And on the other hand, we see Seo Jae telling Beck Ryune, "I'm a friend of this dog's owner, so I'll adopt it." Beck Ryune says, "This will be very difficult. Can you do it?" Both are smiling while talking, and Sang Hyuk is watching them from outside. Then, seeing Seo Jae, he remembers a past scene where Seo Jae used to be a king 500 years ago. Then, in the present, Sang Hyuk angrily tells Beck Ryune, "You speak very nicely to all the men here so that people keep coming to your hospital." Beck Ryune says, "No, that's not true. And what happened? You're misunderstanding." Sang Hyuk then says nothing and leaves. Next, we see Beck Ryune going home when she feels like someone is following her. She falls while running. Just as a man is about to attack her, Sang Hyuk arrives and saves Beck Ryune. The man runs away. Then Beck Ryune asks Sang Hyuk, "Didn't you get hurt? Isn't your hand broken?" Sang Hyuk says, "What are you talking about? Should I have gotten hurt?" Beck Ryune says, "Yes, whoever is with me always gets hurt." Then Beck Ryune tells about her past. "Whenever I date someone, they get hurt." Then Beck Ryune touches Sang Hyuk's face and says, "You're perfectly fine." In this happiness, Beck Ryune hugs Sang Hyuk and kisses him very happily. Then Beck Ryune remembers what she did, so she says sorry and says, "I have to go to my friend." She goes to her friend at a restaurant and tells her everything that happened today. Her friend says, "Your 1,000 days are not over yet, so how can you find love? Suppose God chose another boy for you, and you don't like him, what will you do? So you should also tell the mountain god in your prayers which boy you like." Beck Ryune says, "Yes, I will do that." Then, in the next scene, we see Seo Jae looking at a video where a girl is going on a bus with an umbrella, but when she returns, she doesn't have the umbrella. Seo Jae doesn't know that this girl is Beck Ryune. Next, we see Sang Hyuk looking at himself in the mirror, seeing a small injury on his head. On the other hand, we see Beck Ryune being very happy that Sang Hyuk is the man that the mountain god sent for me. Then she looks at her calendar, seeing that she only has to go to the mountain 4 more times. In the morning, Beck Ryune goes to the mountain and while praying says, "Send Sang Hyuk to me." After praying, she goes to the same restaurant, but she learns that Yoon Chae has died. A woman tells her she left the gas open. Then Beck Ryune is thinking, how do I get a photo of Sang Hyuk so that I can show the mountain god, so they don't have any confusion about which boy to send for me? So she calls Sang Hyuk and says, "Your Dongchil is getting fat, so you have to bring him to the hospital." Sang Hyuk says, "Okay." Then Sang Hyuk is going to the hospital when he sees a child. The child tells Sang Hyuk, "This dog has gained weight." Sang Hyuk says, "I know, that's why I'm taking him to the hospital." When Sang Hyuk goes to the hospital, Beck Ryune sees that Sang Hyuk has an injury on his head. Beck Ryune says, "This injury must have happened on the day you saved me, right?" Later, Beck Ryune applies medicine to Sang Hyuk's injury and says, "Will you come with me to eat?" Then both go to a restaurant. Beck Ryune says, "This restaurant is really good." Sang Hyuk says, "You don't know, this restaurant is very good. People come here and become the next couple." Beck Ryune says, "That will happen to us too, right?" Sang Hyuk says, "No, we've just come here to eat." Then Beck Ryune sees that Sang Hyuk's injury has suddenly disappeared, but she doesn't understand and says, "This is the magic of my hands." Then both eat, and when Beck Ryune goes to pay the bill, Park says, "Sang Hyuk has already paid the bill." Angrily, she says to Sang Hyuk, "You did this so that we wouldn't date again, right?" And leaves angrily. While sleeping, she angrily says, "Why did he do that? Does he not like me at all?" On the other hand, Sang Hyuk also wakes up while sleeping and says, "Why did she get angry? I treated her to such an expensive meal." Next, we see Sang Hyuk going to the same mountain, and when he returns, Beck Ryune is thinking about him. Seeing Sang Hyuk in front of her, she is startled and quickly comes to him and says, "What are you doing here? By the way, today is my 997th day, and can I get your photo?" She takes his picture. Sang Hyuk says, "Why are you doing this? Remove my photo." Then Sang Hyuk tries to snatch Beck Ryune's phone, and during this, they kiss. On the other hand, we see Dongchil when Sang Hyuk took him to the hospital. He was telling his friends the same scene. "I saw how a woman applied ointment to Sang Hyuk's forehead injury." Now we see Sang Hyuk and Beck Ryune going to the restaurant again. Sang Hyuk asks, "Why do you go to that mountain?" Beck Ryune says, "A tarot reader told me so I go. Then Sang-hyuk calls a driver to go home. The driver arrives and gives Sang-hyuk the key. Then Sang-hyuk sees that the man has the same mark on his hand as the man who attacked Beck Ryune. Sang-hyuk catches him and asks, "Why did you do that?" Then we see that man and a woman. The woman is the one whose hospital was opposite Beck Ryune's hospital. The woman says, "I asked this man to just scare Beck Ryune because no one has come to my hospital since her hospital was built. I asked him to scare her just so she would run away. Please forgive us." Beck Ryune says, "Let them go." Sang-hyuk says, "You should tell your parents what happened to you." Beck Ryune says, "I don't have parents. I'm an orphan. Someone abandoned me when I was young, and a woman raised me." Then we see in a flashback that So-hee is praying very hard, "May I find my love." Sang-hyuk, who is a Cupid, comes to know that a girl is working very hard to find her love. Sang-hyuk comes to her and is about to shoot an arrow of love, but he sees that So-hee is laughing. Sang-hyuk thinks, "She's laughing looking at me." His arrow is released and comes back, hitting Sang-hyuk himself. Sang-hyuk falls in love with So-hee. Then, So-hee sees COJ coming there. COJ says, "I'm meeting you after a long time." Both of them are talking and Sang-hyuk is watching them. Next, So-hee overhears some people talking and, frightened, starts running away. Soldiers run after her to catch her. They shoot So-hee with an arrow, causing her to fall from the mountain, but Sang-hyuk arrives and saves her. Then Sang-hyuk brings So-hee to a cave and treats her. When So-hee regains consciousness, she thinks, "What am I doing here?" Cupids cannot see humans, meaning Sang-hyuk cannot see So-hee. Then So-hee starts running away. Then we see an old man who says to Sang-hyuk, "You shouldn't have done that. So-hee and Seo-jae were destined to meet, and you fell in love with her, so the girl's death was destined. You will also have to suffer the punishment for this mistake." Next, we see Sang-hyuk, in front of whom is the same old man and his friends. The old man says to Sang-hyuk, "You are a Cupid, and you can never love humans." Then the old man uses his powers and sets fire around all the Cupids. But Sang-hyuk is not afraid and is simply passing through the fire while thinking about So-hee. Sang-hyuk's friends say, "He has gone mad because he is the one who has been hit by the arrow of love." On the other hand, we see some soldiers fighting fiercely in the palace, but the face of the person who is making all this happen is not shown. Then we see in the present that Seo-jae was seeing all this in his dream. Next, we see Beck Ryune going to her hospital. On the way, Sang-hyuk meets her and asks, "Do you want to fall in love?" Beck Ryune says, "Yes." Sang-hyuk says, "I am that man, but I will help you find your love. What kind of boy do you like?" Beck Ryune describes her preferences and leaves. Coming home, she thinks, "He ruined my mood early this morning. First, he said I am that guy. Then he wants to set me up with another boy." Next, we see Seo-jae finding out that the umbrella he saw in the camera is with a girl. He goes to meet that girl. The girl has a mother, and when she goes to the girl's room, she sees that someone has killed the girl. Seo-jae also comes inside and sees that the girl has hanged herself. Next, Beck Ryune gives the nurse her umbrella and says, "I forgot to give you this umbrella." Then she goes to the mountain and shows God Sang-hyuk's picture, saying, "I want this boy." On her way home, Sang-hyuk sends her a girl's picture. Beck Ryune says, "I don't like her." On the other hand, we see Dong-koo in an academy. He says to a girl, "Will I be able to learn to woo a girl in 3 months?" The girl says, "Yes, definitely." Next, we see Sang-hyuk, who has come to Seo-jae. Sang-hyuk says, "You shouldn't be looking for witnesses, but the culprit." Then Sang-hyuk puts photos of all the girls in front and points out some common things. Whenever they died, there was heavy snowfall. It also shows that everyone had a notebook, which was red, and this notebook was found near everyone's body. But a notebook was not found after Yoon-shi's death. Sang-hyuk says, "Find this notebook. You will believe my words." Then Sang-hyuk says, "Before killing people, the culprit gives them this notebook and kills them after 24 hours. If you don't believe me, look around Yoon-shi. You will surely find this notebook." This case started in 1993 and is still ongoing. Later, a policeman comes to Seo-jae and says, "This is the man who was standing on the car with a gun." Seo-jae says to Sang-hyuk, "I don't believe you because you were born in 1994 as written on your ID, and you're telling me about a 1993 case. How is that possible? How can we believe you?" Next, we see Sang-hyuk coming to Beck Ryune and asking, "Why don't you like that boy?" Beck Ryune says, "I don't like him. Actually, I like you because you said you can't see me alone, and I like you." Sang-hyuk says, "That can never be possible. Forget everything you just said." Poor Beck Ryune cries a lot after coming home, but in the morning she gets ready quickly and gets on the bus to go to the mountain. We see a man in a black coat following her. On the other hand, Seo-jae goes to the hospital to meet his dog and asks a nurse, "Where is Beck Ryune?" The nurse says, "I don't know." As Seo-jae is leaving, he sees an umbrella with a nurse and asks, "Is this your umbrella?" The nurse says, "Yes, it's mine." Seo-jae asks, "Where was it on the 21st?" The nurse says, "Beck Ryune took it." Seo-jae quickly gets in the car and calls someone saying, "Take care of this. I'm coming." On the other hand, we see Beck Ryune going to the mountain, but the man in the black coat is following her. Meanwhile, Song-hyuk has gone to the hospital and overhears some nurses talking. Beck Ryune is also a witness in the same case. Then we see Beck Ryune praying to God thousands of times. When she looks back, she sees a man. She says, "Are you Song-hyuk? Are you there?" On the other hand, we see Song-hyuk running towards the mountain. When he reaches the mountain, no one is there. He only sees the same old man. Then we see in a flashback where the old man and Sang-hyuk are on the mountain. The old man pushes So-hee off the mountain and says to Sang-hyuk, "Whenever you love a girl, she will die like this. Because you are a Cupid. You have no right to love humans." Then in the present, Sang-hyuk says to the old man, "I will kill you." He extends his hand to kill the man, but his hands stop there, and he cannot do anything. He uses his wings, but the old man burns his wings with his powers and inflicts many wounds on Sang-hyuk's body. Later, we see the same scene where Beck Ryune sees that someone is there and is about to fall from the mountain. Then Seo-jae arrives and saves Beck Ryune. Next, we see Sang-hyuk coming to the police station completely injured and telling the policeman, "I have to find Beck Ryune." On the other hand, Seo-jae asks Beck Ryune, "The girl you were talking to at the restaurant that day has died. Can you tell me what happened to that girl?" Beck Ryune says, "Yes, I was at the bus stop when a boy in a black coat came to her." On the other hand, we see Sang-hyuk telling the police, "Find Beck Ryune quickly." Then, Beck Ryune and Seo-jae arrive there. Sang-hyuk says to Beck Ryune, "Are you okay?" Beck Ryune says, "Yes. And how did you get this injury?" Then Beck Ryune starts applying medicine to Sang-hyuk's injury. Then a policeman says to Seo-jae, "Look, how good this girlfriend-boyfriend couple looks." But Seo-jae says, "These two aren't a boyfriend and girlfriend. Stop talking nonsense." Just then, Dae-sik arrives and says, "Sir, are you here?" All the policemen are surprised that Dae-sik is their superior, so why is he calling Sang-hyuk sir? Next, we see Beck Ryune bringing Sang-hyuk to her hospital. Applying ointment to his injury, she says, "I know you like me. No matter how hard you try to distance yourself from me, your heart remains immersed in my thoughts." Then Beck Ryune puts her hand on Sang-hyuk's heart and says, "Look, your heart is also beating for me." Sang-hyuk starts laughing. Beck Ryune says, "You look very good when you laugh." Sang-hyuk says, "You are a witness in this case, so be careful and don't go out of the house without telling anyone." Next, we see Dong-koo going to his academy when his bag falls from his hand. It contains chocolates, and Dong-chil eats the chocolates. Therefore, Dong-chil is quickly brought to the hospital. All the Cupids bring him, and Beck Ryune treats him. Coming out, she says, "No problem, he's fine." Later, Beck Ryune asks, "Who are all these boys?" Sang-hyuk says, "These two are my older brothers." Now we see Dong-chil, who is inside a locker, but he transforms into a human. Later, when he comes out, Dong-chil and Dong-pal see him and come to him shouting. Beck Ryune sees that another boy has arrived, so she asks, "Who is this?" Sang-hyuk says, "He is also my older brother." Beck Ryune says, "So you are the youngest here?" Sang-hyuk says, "Yes, but actually, Sang-hyuk is the oldest here." On the other hand, we see Seo-jae coming to Yoon-shi's house and searching for the red book. He finds the red book there, and now he starts believing Sang-hyuk's words. Later, Seo-jae says to Dae-sik, "Did you and Sang-hyuk know about this case beforehand?" Dae-sik tells everything, and we also see the past scene. When Jong-ah went missing, the police were searching for her, but nothing was found. All the suspects the police had disappeared, and the witnesses also started disappearing. People started making fun of the police. Therefore, the chief investigator killed himself, and the case was closed. But a year later, a new officer arrived. We see that it was Sang-hyuk. He investigated the case and found some common things. Whoever died had this red notebook. The culprit would give them this notebook and say that you have to fill this notebook. If you don't do it within 24 hours, you will disappear. However, people found it funny, and within 24 hours, they really disappeared. Next, Sang-hyuk and Beck Ryune are both at the police station. A specialist asks Beck Ryune, "Where were you?" Beck Ryune says, "What I saw was that a man wearing a jacket grabbed Yoon-shu from behind. There was another girl who saw it all. I have also seen my past, where I am in Joshikul, and I have seen Seo-jae there. But another man who was coming towards me was 180 centimeters tall, but his face was not visible." Next, we see Sang-hyuk tying a scarf around Beck Ryune's neck and saying, "It's going to snow heavily tomorrow, so promise me that you will stay home tomorrow." Beck Ryune says, "Okay." "But why are you behaving so nicely with me today?" Sang Hyuk says, "Because you are a witness, and my job is to keep you safe." Then we see Beck Ryune's friend, Do-ra, who says to Beck Ryune, "Let's go out and drink." Then both drink at a store. Beck Ryune comes out of the store. Just then, a girl also comes out, and as she is going, she feels that a man is following her. She screams. Beck Ryune hears her voice and goes there, but sees only a dog. Then we see Sang Hyuk going to Beck Ryune's house, but she is not there. Then he goes to the hospital and sees that Beck Ryune is performing surgery on a dog. Sang Hyuk says to Beck Ryune, "Didn't I tell you not to go out?" Then he says to Do-ra, "Don't bring her out after today." Then Sang Hyuk goes to drop them home. Do-ra says to Sang Hyuk, "If you're so worried about her, why don't you come inside? Sleep here tonight." Sang Hyuk goes inside. Then everyone eats, and later they go to sleep. Sang Hyuk goes to Beck Ryune's room. Next, we see Dongpal and the other Cupids. They are looking at the arrows and saying, "We have very little time left." Next, we see Beck Ryune having a dream. The tarot reader tells her, "If you stay with Sang Hyuk, you will be safe. Otherwise, you will die." Sang Hyuk also has a dream. Jong-ah is crying and saying, "Don't you regret not loving me?" Then Beck Ryune also comes there. She sits next to Sang Hyuk and says, "He is taking care of me, but he is sleeping as if he were dead." Next we see Dae-sik, who says, "All the witnesses are dead, but why wasn't Beck Ryune killed?" Sang Hyuk says, "Because I'm with Beck Ryune." Later, we see the culprit looking at Sang Hyuk's photo. There is a girl whom the culprit attacks. Next, Seo-jae asks Dae-sik, "Sang Hyuk is 29 years old, so how does he know about the cases that happened before he was 29? Dae-sik says, "Sang Hyuk's father was a policeman, so he knows about all the cases." Next, we see Beck Ryune telling her friend Do-ra, "Because of the specialist yesterday, I saw my past life. I was falling from a mountain, and a friend saved me. He also had wings, meaning I must have been an angel." Next, we see Do-ra applying for a part-time job at the same academy. The girl says, "All our students have found love. There are only 3 boys here. Can you teach them?" Then Do-ra comes to class and asks Dong-koo, "What kind of girl would you like to date?" Dong-koo says, "I would like to date a girl like me because I am very beautiful." Next, we see Beck Ryune getting very drunk. She calls Sang Hyuk and says, "Come to me. Otherwise, I will stay out here and the culprit will take me away." Hearing this, Sang Hyuk starts running from his house. Dong-chil also sees him and turns into a dog when he starts to follow him. Then we see Beck Ryune waking up in the morning and asking her friend, "What happened yesterday?" Her friend says, "I don't know." Later, Beck Ryune remembers that she was acting crazy yesterday, and Sang Hyuk was also with her. Beck Ryune says, "I was an angel in my past life, and my wings were here, but now they are all gone." Because she was drunk, Beck Ryune kisses Sang Hyuk. Next, we see Sang Hyuk at the police station. Just then, 2 women arrive fighting. One woman says, "This girl is having an affair with my husband." Sang Hyuk goes outside, and Seo-jae also sees him. Sang Hyuk comes to the roof and shoots love bullets at them. Just then, Seo-jae arrives with a gun in his hand. He says, "Don't move and tell me who you were shooting." Sang Hyuk says, "See for yourself." Seo-jae looks at the bullets, but they are small plastic pellets. When he looks towards the target, he sees 2 people becoming intimate. He fearfully says, "What were you looking at?" Sang Hyuk says, "What?" When Sang Hyuk also looks, he is also shocked and says, "Seo-jae, you're misunderstanding me." Next, we see Dong-koo at the academy. Do-ra is fixing his clothes. Dong-koo feels good because a woman has touched him for the first time. Just then, a little girl bumps into Dong-koo, and at the same time, Dong-koo and Do-ra kiss. Next, we see Dong-chil telling Sang Hyuk, "I saw you kiss Beck Ryune. You loved 2 girls, So-hee and Jong-ah. Both died, so why didn't anything happen to Beck Ryune?" Sang Hyuk remembers Beck Ryune saying, "I'm an angel." Both think, is she really an angel? Next, Beck Ryune receives a message. "I need your help. Come to this place, but don't tell anyone." Beck Ryune calls Seo-jae and asks, "Check this number. Is it a girl's number?" Seo-jae says, "Yes, it's a girl's number." Hearing this, Beck Ryune hangs up. Seo-jae says to a policeman, "Find out whose number this is." After a while, the policeman comes running and says, "I checked. It's Yoon Shi's number and it's on right now." Then everyone runs from there. They start chasing Beck Ryune. On the other hand, when Sang Hyuk goes to the police station, a policeman says to him, "Where has everyone gone?" Now we see Beck Ryune reaching the place where the culprit had asked her to come. She receives calls from both Seo-jae and Sang Hyuk, but she doesn't see them. As she is about to go inside, the culprit arrives. Beck Ryune fights with the culprit for a long time, but the culprit pushes her and is about to kill her. Then he hears the sound of a police car and runs away. Sang-hyuk comes running, and there is a dead body there. He goes to the hospital where Beck Ryune is undergoing surgery. Then we see that the body is Yoon-shi's, which was in a drum. When the culprit pushes Beck Ryune, Yoon-shi's body falls out of the drum. Next, we see Sang-hyuk coming to Beck Ryune. Beck Ryune is in her dream where she meets a little boy whom we have seen before. The boy says to Beck Ryune, "I can help you find your love. You will find your love when the flowers bloom on this tree and you take a petal in your finger. Then you will find your first love." Beck Ryune sees that the girl has taken a petal in her finger. In front of her is a man with a bow. That man is Sang-hyuk. Now, so he says, "I have found my first love." On the other hand, Sang-hyuk is leaving. Then Beck Ryune opens her eyes and says, "Sang-hyuk, it was you. You are my man." Next, we see the small child, whose name we don't know, but he is the child from 500 years ago. Then we see that when Sang-hyuk shot the arrow of love at So-hee, this child changed its direction, and the arrow of love hit Sang-hyuk. Then we see the same scene where everyone was gathered and the appointment ceremony was about to take place. Sang-hyuk also came there, so he sees Sang-hyuk. Seo-jae gets up and starts going towards Sang-hyuk, but So-hee comes in between. Then we learn that secret people have surrounded these people from all sides, and they were shooting arrows. Sang-hyuk comes running and saves So-hee. Next, we see the same little boy telling So-hee, "I can change your destiny." So-hee says, "What will I have to do?" The boy says, "You have to kill yourself. There is a mountain. You jump from it. You will be reborn, and you both can meet." So-hee sees a man of Seo-jae talking and goes and tells Seo-jae. When So-hee goes to die, Seo-jae's men are already waiting there. Seo-jae says to So-hee, "If you can't be mine, you can't be anyone's." He tries to kill So-hee with a knife, but So-hee grabs the knife and blood starts flowing from his hand. She runs away. Soldiers are chasing So-hee. While running, So-hee jumps from the mountain and dies. Next, when So-hee is reborn as Jong-ah and a large stone is about to fall on her, Sang-hyuk comes and saves her. Jong-ah says, "I smell flowers from you." Then she goes to Sang-hyuk and says, "Yesterday you said you would take me out to eat, right? Let's go with me." Then we see the same scene where Jong-ah had said, "I will wait for you here," and then she disappeared from there. Sang-hyuk was crying a lot. Then we see in the present where Beck Ryune says, "You are my man." Sang-hyuk says, "Are you all right?" Then the doctors come and ask Beck Ryune, "Are you all right?" Beck Ryune says, "Maybe I've lost my mind." Then Beck Ryune remembers the scene when the culprit was killing her. He had made a mark on her neck. Then we see Myun Min with his employee Jiyeon. Jiyeon is remembering a scene when she met a man. The man had given her a red notebook to fill and said, "If you don't do this, I will kill you." Then Jiyeon is going home at night. She realizes that someone is following her. Then a man catches Jiyeon and takes her away forcefully. Next, Myun Min is fleeing the country when he is caught. The police see a mark on his neck. He is asked many questions. "Why did you do this?" But he doesn't say anything. Next, we see Beck Ryune, who has come to the mountain. She was praying because earlier she thought she had prayed here 1,000 times, but it wasn't so. Then we are shown a scene where she is looking at her calendar. She didn't go to the mountain on the 4th because on that day she saw Sang-hyuk, and they kissed. That's why she couldn't go to the mountain. Then Beck Ryune hears Sang-hyuk's voice. Sang-hyuk comes and hugs Beck Ryune. He says, "You are my woman." Beck Ryune also says, "You were the one I was waiting for. You are my man." Then we see Seo-jae, seeing both of them and getting very angry. But later, he remembers a scene from his past life when he was killing So-hee with a knife, and so he calms down. Next, we see a man coming to Jong-ah's house and leaving a dog there. Jong-ah's mother comes and takes the dog inside the house. Then Sang-hyuk is shown there, making it seem like he left the dog, but his shoes were different from the man's shoes. Then Sang-hyuk and Beck Ryune go to the same orphanage where Beck Ryune was raised. Going there, both play with the children. Then both wash clothes in the same tub and kiss there. A policeman was keeping an eye on both of them, so he calls Seo-jae and says, "What did you tell me to watch? I can't watch anymore." Then we see that when Sang-hyuk was putting away the tub, he finds a burnt piece of paper with some words written on it related to committing sins with women. He asks the orphanage owner, "Who wrote this?" She says, "There was a director here before. If the children did something naughty, that director would beat them and give them a red notebook and tell them to fill it." Next, a man with a dog is shown. He comes to Beck Ryune and says, "Treat my dog." This man is Yoon-shi's husband. He thanks Beck Ryune and says, "You found Yoon-shi's dead body. This dog was also found there, so it feels like my Yoon-shi has come back." Then we see Jong-ah's parents on the other hand, who come to Beck Ryune's hospital with their dog. Seo-jae is also with them. After a while, Sang-hyuk also arrives there. Seeing Sang-hyuk, Jong-ah's parents say, "Aren't you the one who used to be with our daughter? But how are you still so young?" Sang-hyuk says nothing. Then Jong-ah's parents look at their dog and start talking about their daughter. Beck Ryune starts crying listening to their talk. Jong-ah's parents ask, "What happened, son?" Beck Ryune says, "Nothing." Then Jong-ah's parents leave. Beck Ryune says to Seo-jae and Sang-hyuk, "Why can't you two become friends?" Seo-jae says, "I'll befriend anyone, but not him. He has no identity. Sometimes he seems like a ghost to me, sometimes an alien." Then we see Dong-koo asking Dong-chil, "We don't have much time left, so tell me what I have to do if I want to get close to a girl." Dong-chil says, "You both have to eat together." Later, Dong-koo comes to the restaurant and Do-ra is also there. Both eat together. Dong-koo says, "I'm a Cupid, but I don't have wings right now." Do-ra says, "I don't know what you are, but I want to know you because you are very attractive." Then we see Dong-chil and Dong-pal shooting love bullets. The arrows completely turn into gold, and their wings return. They slowly start disappearing and become very happy. On the other hand, Sang-hyuk is remembering his past. He and So-hee are both drawing. Sang-hyuk looks at So-hee's drawing and says, "How did you know what I look like? And you made me look exactly like a Cupid." So-hee says, "When I was holding the petals in my finger, I saw you." Then Sang-hyuk's drawing is also shown, in which he had sketched So-hee. On the other hand, we see Dong-koo in the restaurant, suddenly starting to disappear. Just then, Do-ra arrives, having gone to the washroom. A waitress comes to her and says, "Your bill?" Do-ra looks around and says, "Where did Dong-koo go?" The waitress says, "I don't know." But Dong-koo is standing there and shouting, "I'm standing here. Give me the bill." But no one can see him. Do-ra pays the bill and leaves. On the other hand, we see Dong-chil and Dong-pal dancing in the joy of disappearing. But suddenly they turn back into humans. Then we see the arrows, which hadn't completely turned to gold. Dong-pal and Dong-chil think, "What happened? Are we back again?" Then we see Beck Ryune going to Sang-hyuk's house and seeing the same drawing where So-hee and Sang-hyuk have made their drawings. After this, Sang-hyuk and Beck Ryune go to Jong-ah's house. Jong-ah's mother opens the door and says, "We were just about to come to you. Our dog is fine now. By the way, we're about to have dinner. Would you like to eat with us?" Beck Ryune goes inside and looks at Jong-ah's room. She starts remembering scenes from her past life, where Jong-ah and Sang-hyuk are eating together. Jong-ah says to Sang-hyuk, "Come here, I have something to tell you." Then she kisses Sang-hyuk. In the present, Beck Ryune, Sang-hyuk, and Jong-ah's parents all have dinner together. Jong-ah's parents look at Beck Ryune and say, "Seeing you, it seems like our daughter Jong-ah has come back." Hearing this, Beck Ryune starts crying a lot. Jong-ah's father says, "Don't talk about Jong-ah. This girl starts crying." Beck Ryune, wiping her tears, says, "It's not like that. The food is very good, that's why I was crying." Then she bravely says, "Can I be your Jong-ah?" Then we see Sang-hyuk coming to drop Beck Ryune home. Beck Ryune says to Sang-hyuk, "After meeting you, I have loved every moment of mine. I love you very much. I don't care who you are. I just love you, and I will keep loving you." After this, both kiss. Beck Ryune sees that Sang-hyuk's hands are slowly disappearing. Sang-hyuk asks Beck Ryune, "Why did you jump from the mountain?" Beck Ryune says, "Because I wanted to kill myself. There was a child who said that if I kill myself, I will be able to meet you." Beck Ryune then asks, "Your hands were disappearing. Is this metamorphosis?" Sang-hyuk says, "Do you know this too?" Beck Ryune says, "Yes, I know this is a process that happens with Cupids, so that your face always remains childlike. But I don't want that. I don't like your childlike face." Sang-hyuk says, "It's not in my hands. I can't do anything about it." Beck Ryune asks, "When you leave because of metamorphosis, when will you come back?" Sang-hyuk says, "I don't know. It can take a year or even 10 years. Beck Ryune says in shock, "What? 10 years? I can't wait for you for 10 years. Sang-hyuk says, "I can't do anything, it's not in my hands." Beck Ryune leaves angrily. When Sang-hyuk comes home, he sees Dong-koo fighting with Dong-chil and Dong-pal. Dong-koo shouts, "That was my most special moment, but you ruined everything. And on top of that, I had to pay the bill." Dong-chil thinks and says, "Yes, once I missed my arrow. But that arrow came back to me, so I aimed again." Dong-pal says, "But what would have happened if that arrow hadn't come back?" Both look at each other and start thinking. Next we see Sang-hyuk, still sitting with Seo-jae. Seo-jae asks Sang-hyuk, "Is Beck Ryune really So-hee?" Sang-hyuk says, "Yes, she is." Seo-jae is a little shocked and says, "But if she is So-hee, can she remember her past life?" Sang-hyuk says, "Yes, if her emotions are very deep, she can remember everything." Seo-jae starts thinking, and then says to Sang-hyuk, "If she remembers everything, will she hate me?" Sang-hyuk says, "I don't know, but if you are hateful, then yes." she will hate you. Seo-jae becomes serious and silently leaves. On the other hand, we see Beck Ryune in her hospital, thinking about what she had done in her past life that she is connected with Sang-hyuk in this life too. She holds a piece of paper in her hand and looks at it. This was the same paper that said, if you really want to find your love, you have to change your destiny. Looking at this paper, Beck Ryune thinks, can I really change my destiny? Then we see Do-ra in class, missing Dong-koo. She thinks, if he was really a Cupid, will he come back now? Then suddenly there is a commotion near the classroom door, and Do-ra looks towards the door, but no one is there. She mutters to herself, where did you go? Now we see Myun-min, who is in jail and thinking, I'm safe here. No one can reach me here. But suddenly the lights go out and darkness falls inside the jail. A police officer comes running and shouts, what's happening here? But when the lights come back on, Myun-min is not in his cell. Then we see Sang-hyuk and Beck Ryune. Beck Ryune says, am I really your first and last girlfriend? Sang-hyuk smiles and says, yes, you are my first and last girlfriend. Beck Ryune says, then why are you leaving me? Sang-hyuk says, because it's my destiny. Beck Ryune looks at him and says, if I want to change my destiny, will you stop? Sang-hyuk becomes silent. Beck Ryune says, I will change my destiny, and I will not let you go. Then we see Dong-pal and Dong-chil looking at their arrows, and suddenly the arrows completely turn to gold. Dong-pal says, does this mean we did everything right? Dong-chil says, I don't know, but now we have to wait. On the other hand, we see Do-ra still sitting in her room, looking at her hands. She murmurs, I really saw Dong-koo and his wings. Is he really a Cupid? Then there's a knock on her door. She opens the door and sees no one, but a small note is lying on the ground below. She picks up the note and reads, I'm always with you. Do-ra is surprised and smiles softly. Now we see Myun-min in the police station, trembling with fear. The police officer asks him, why are you so scared? Myun-min softly says, he's back. The police officer asks, who's back? Myun-min tremblingly says, the one who gave me the red notebook. The police officer is shocked and starts preparing a report quickly. On the other hand, we see Beck Ryune checking a patient in the hospital. Then her phone rings. She picks up the phone, and it's Seo-jae on the other side. Seo-jae says, I need to meet you right now. Beck Ryune asks, what happened? Seo-jae says, I have some important things to talk about Sang-hyuk. Now we see a man in a dark alley turning the pages of a red notebook. He smiles and softly says, the game is about to begin. Sang-hyuk says to Beck Ryune, what are you thinking? Beck Ryune says, nothing, just something came to mind. And on the other hand, we see Myun-min, where all the prisoners are going to eat, but Myun-min doesn't go. So a security guard asks, why aren't you going? Myun-min says, I have a very high fever. Hearing this, the security guard opens the door and goes to get medicine for him. But just then, a man arrives with a bag in his hand. Myun-min looks back and says to the man, who are you? Later, it is revealed that Myun-min has died. Then we see a man in the hospital who comes to Beck Ryune and says, my dog can't breathe. Beck Ryune says, we'll have to perform surgery on it. But there is a shortage of blood, so a nurse says, we can get blood from the nearby hospital. Beck Ryune says, okay, you go, get it. Then we see that while Beck Ryune is performing surgery on the dog, the man says, you're lying. Beck Ryune understands that this man is the culprit. Then we are shown a past scene where Myun-min goes out somewhere with Yoon-shi, and Yoon-shi's husband sees this, what is my wife doing? Then in the present, the man, who is Yoon-shi's husband, goes to Beck Ryune with a knife and says, you're lying. Tell me, will my dog be okay after surgery? Just then, Beck Ryune sees the nurse arriving. So she says, give me the knife. I have to start the surgery. The man gives her the knife. Then Beck Ryune says, go outside and wait. Yoon-shi's husband goes outside. Beck Ryune performs the dog's surgery and comes out and says to the man, your dog will stay here for a few days. When it's better, you can come and get it. The man leaves. Just then, Seo-jae arrives and asks, what happened? The nurse says, we just performed a surgery, and looking at the dog, it seemed like it had been beaten, but its owner said that the dog fell down from me. Sang-hyuk also arrives there. Next, we see Do-ra remembering the scene where Dong-koo saved her. Then Dong-koo calls. After this, he calls Do-ra to the same restaurant. Then both go inside the restaurant. Do-ra asks, why do you love me? Dong-koo says, I have been living here for 500 years, but no woman has ever been as kind to me as you. That's why I want to love you. I even want to marry you because I have very little time left. Then we see Dong-chil coming to the little boy and saying, what would have happened if I hadn't missed that arrow that day? The boy says, regretting won't change anything. Everyone gets 2 chances. You can shoot the arrow again. Dong-chil says, how old are you? The boy says, I'm 9 years old, and leaves. Just then, Sang-hyuk arrives. Dong-chil says, I don't understand why Seo-jae, who was so evil before, is now investigating this case. Sang Hyuk says, no, he didn't kill So-hee. So he killed herself. Dong-chil asks, why did she do that? Sang Hyuk says, a child told her. Dong-chil says, who is that child? Sang Hyuk says, I don't know. Later, Dong-chil says, there's a child here too, and he just gave me a solution. Sang Hyuk asks, where is the child now? And they are searching for the child. Then Sang Hyuk sees the child sitting near the water. Sang Hyuk runs there, but the child is not there. Then the child suddenly appears in front of him. Sang Hyuk asks, are you the same child who appeared in front of So-hee 500 years ago and asked her to kill you? Why did you do that? The child says, I have prayed 1,000 times and I have worked hard taking 2 births just to get you. But you did nothing to get me, and you also had many chances, but you did nothing. Sang Hyuk says, what can I do? Anyway, the transformation is about to begin. The child says, don't make excuses, God will only give you 1 chance now. Then the child disappears from there. Sang Hyuk comes to Dong-pal and asks, what is it that I don't know? Dong-pal explains, when you are in transformation, there is something like a transparent thing on you, and if an arrow passes through it, your transformation will stop. And if the arrow misses, there will be many problems. Then, in the next scene, Do-ra comes to Dong-koo and says, let's go on a date. Dong-koo is surprised. Then both of them go on a date and have a lot of fun. Then, in the next scene, Beck Ryune says to Seo-jae, I heard that voice in my previous birth that you are lying, and I heard that voice recently too. Will you believe me? Seo-jae says, yes, I believe you. Then, in the next scene, Beck Ryune and Sang Hyuk meet. Sang Hyuk says to Beck Ryune, you have worked very hard to meet me. Now I will work hard and stop the transformation. Beck Ryune says, really? Can we be together forever now? Sang Hyuk takes out a ring and puts it on Beck Ryune. Beck Ryune does the same, and then both kiss. Then in the next scene, Sang Hyuk looks at a crystal inside a glass and says to Dong-chil, can you shoot an arrow at it? Dong-chil says, I cannot do that. If I miss, I will regret it very much. Sang Hyuk says, you are my friend and I have complete faith in you that you can do it. Dong-chil looks at the arrow and says, now I am going to shoot this arrow at Sang Hyuk. Dong-pal says, you won't be able to do it. Dong-chil says, I will, and this will be my last shot. Then in the next scene, we see Beck Ryune sitting in a car with Seo-jae. Then Sang Hyuk calls her and says, get out of the car quickly. But then Sang Hyuk's transformation begins, and he disappears. On the other hand, Dong-chil is in his room and looking at the crystal inside the glass, which has disappeared. Then Dong-chil takes the arrow and shoots his arrow at the same crystal. The arrow hits the target, and Sang Hyuk first faints inside the crystal. But then he hears Beck Ryune's voice and breaks the crystal with the help of the arrow. On the other hand, a bomb is planted in Beck Ryune's car, which explodes. Seo-jae is also there, who sees that Sang Hyuk has saved Beck Ryune and also sees his wings. The criminal is also watching all this. Sang Hyuk goes after the criminal and starts to kill him. Then the same old man comes to the criminal and says, you also had 2 chances, but you lost them. Then we see in a flashback that when the criminal was young, his mother abandoned him at an orphanage. Then in the present, we see the old man saying to the criminal, you had a chance to live well, but you started doing all these bad deeds again. Therefore, now you will be born again, and you will become the worst man at that time, because it will all be due to your actions. Sang Hyuk is lying injured, and Beck Ryune and Seo-jae also arrive there. Beck Ryune starts crying a lot and says to Sang Hyuk, don't leave me. But Sang Hyuk disappears from there. On the other hand, we see Dong-chil and Dong-pal. They also get wings and disappear. Then we see Dong-koo, who is with Do-ra and is teaching her archery. He also starts disappearing and says goodbye to Do-ra, saying, I had a very good day today. Then we are shown in a news report, where a reporter is talking about the criminal. This criminal first killed his mother because his mother abandoned him at an orphanage. Then he killed a director because that director used to beat him. Then he killed a landowner because she looked like his mother. After this criminal started feeling that he had a lot of power, so he started killing women too. Then, in the next scene, we see Seo-jae, who goes to Beck Ryune's house every day and brings food for her. But Do-ra says Beck Ryune doesn't want to come out of the house. One day, Beck Ryune comes out and says to Seo-jae, I'm fine. Don't come here again and again. Seo-jae says, thank you for believing me. Okay, I will never come again, neither in this life nor in the next birth. Then Seo-jae hugs Beck Ryune. Then in the next scene, we see Do-ra and Beck Ryune, where Beck Ryune says, I wish I could turn back time and stay with Sang Hyuk. Do-ra says, don't worry, everything will be alright slowly. Then in the next scene, we see Beck Ryune going somewhere and looking at a calendar, where it is written that Beck Ryune has started praying on the mountain again, and this is her 997th time going to the mountain. Beck Ryune goes to the mountain and prays. Then she comes to her hospital and treats the dogs. The next day, she goes to the mountain again and collides with a man on the way. That man saves her, and Beck Ryune remembers the same scene. Last time when I fell, Sang Hyuk saved me, but here it is a different boy. She thanks the boy and leaves from there. Then, at her home, she is writing on the calendar, "I just need to go to the mountain one more time," and lies down. Suddenly, her eyes fall on the calendar, where 1000 is written. She asks her friend Du Ra, "Did you do this?" Du Ra says, "No." On the other hand, we see Park coming to Sang Hyuk's house. He looks at the crystal and leaves from there. Then we see the crystal, from which light is emanating. Then in the next scene, Beck Ryune goes to the mountain for the 1000th time. On the other hand, at Sang Hyuk's house, they see the crystal, from which a red thread is coming out. When Beck Ryune is praying, she hears Sang Hyuk's voice. She looks behind and sees that Sang Hyuk is standing in front of her. Beck Ryune comes to Sang Hyuk and touches him and asks, "Are you really here?" Sang Hyuk says, "Yes, although I died, I am reborn. It happened just like your rebirth." Then we see in a flashback, when Beck Ryune is sleeping, the old man comes to her. When the red thread was coming out of the crystal, the old man sends that red thread to Beck Ryune. Then, in the present, Sang Hyuk says, "I was inside the crystal, and when I broke the crystal, I lost my wings. Now I am not a Cupid. I am a simple human being, and now I will not have to go through the transformation." Then both hug, and the old man is watching both of them there. Then, in the next scene, we see Beck Ryune and Sang Hyuk, and together they have a baby girl who is sleeping. Sang Hyuk says, "Why are you telling the same story again and again?" Later, both hug and leave from there. Their daughter, whose name is Rin, is just acting like sleeping and starts laughing after they leave. In the next scene, we see Beck Ryune, their daughter, and Sang Hyuk going to a restaurant. Jong-ah's parents are there. Beck Ryune's daughter is calling them grandma and grandpa, and everyone is eating happily. Then, in the next scene, Beck Ryune is lying in Sang Hyuk's lap and says, "It's a miracle that whenever I open my eyes, you are in front of me." Sang Hyuk says, "Yes, it's a miracle that we are both spending time together, so our love is a miracle every day." And this is where the drama's happy ending occurs.